Sarah had spent 5 years hiding from the military that destroyed her career, until 312 people needed her to remember how to fly. The woman in dirty overalls that everyone ignored was actually Colonel Harvest Dawson, the most decorated Mercy pilot in Air Force history, and today both engines just exploded. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Dawson sat in seat 19B, squeezed between two strangers who didn't want to know her name. The man in 19A, expensive suit, leather briefcase, had looked at her once during boarding. His eyes traveled from her dirty work boots to her faded denim overalls to the actual soil under her fingernails. Then he turned away, moving his briefcase a few inches closer to his side of the armrest. Message received, "You're not my kind of person." The young mother in 19C was too busy with her toddler to notice Sarah at all. The little girl, maybe 3 years old, had sticky hands and was crying about wanting her iPad. Sarah didn't mind being invisible. She'd worked 5 long years to become exactly this, forgettable. She looked down at her hands. Rough hands. Calloused from real work. Dirt pressed deep into the lines of her palms from this morning's planting. She'd been up at dawn, putting in tomato seedlings in the east field. The soil had been perfect, moist but not wet, warming up after the spring thaw. These hands had changed so much in 5 years. 5 years ago, these same hands had gripped the control yoke of a C-130 Hercules cargo plane. They'd been smooth then, covered in flight gloves, steady on the instruments as she flew through hostile territory. 5 years ago, Sarah Dawson wasn't a farmer. 5 years ago, she was Colonel Sarah Harvest Dawson, United States Air Force, with 18 years of service and more humanitarian missions than almost any pilot in military history. But nobody on United Flight 2947 knew that. The businessmen saw a poor farmer woman who probably couldn't afford business class. The mother saw nobody at all. The flight attendant saw someone who'd need help finding the bathroom. Good, Sarah thought. That's exactly what I want them to see. She closed her eyes as the Boeing 777 pushed back from the gate at Denver International Airport. The engine spooled up, that familiar whine she'd heard 10,000 times before, but from the cockpit, not from a middle seat in economy. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We're cleared for takeoff. Flight time to Seattle is 2 hours and 40 minutes. We'll be cruising at 37,000 feet. Weather looks good. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The woman next to Sarah didn't relax. Her toddler was still crying, now kicking the seat in front of them. The businessman put in noise-canceling headphones and opened his laptop. Sarah just sat there, hands folded in her lap, dirt under her nails, thinking about tomatoes. "That's your life now," she told herself. "Tomatoes and chickens and 40 acres in Montana. That's enough. That's good. Let the past stay buried." The plane lifted off. Sarah felt the familiar pressure as they climbed, the engine thrust pushing her back into her seat, the slight turbulence as they punched through lower altitude winds, the banking turn as they headed northwest. She knew every sensation. She'd felt it from the cockpit hundreds of times. But she wasn't that person anymore. Colonel Harvest was dead. Sarah the farmer was alive. And that's how it needs to stay, she thought. The plane leveled off at 37,000 feet. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The businessman immediately reclined his seat, right into Sarah's knees. He didn't apologize or even look back. Sarah shifted, trying to find a comfortable position in the cramped middle seat. Out the window, she could see the Rocky Mountains below, jagged peaks covered in snow, valleys carved deep by ancient glaciers. Beautiful and deadly. She'd flown over these mountains dozens of times, usually at lower altitude in a C-130, usually carrying supplies to remote locations. Once, she'd flown medical supplies to a Native American reservation in Montana during a blizzard. The landing strip was barely visible through the snow. Her co-pilot had been terrified. But Sarah had brought that plane down safe and delivered insulin that saved 6 diabetic children. Call sign, Harvest. Because she harvested lives from death. That's what her squadron had called it. While fighter pilots counted kills, Sarah counted saves. Every ton of food delivered. Every medical supply run completed. Every person who lived because she'd been brave enough to fly into impossible places. For 18 years, that had been her identity. Then came the mission that ended everything. Sarah pushed the memory away. That was 5 years ago. Ancient history. She was a farmer now. She grew food instead of delivering it. Same mission, different method. That's what she told herself every morning when she woke up at dawn to work the fields. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Anything for you, ma'am. Sarah almost said, coffee, black, military strong, the way she'd ordered it 10,000 times in squadron-ready rooms. Instead she said, just water, please. The flight attendant handed her a small plastic cup and moved on. Sarah sipped the water and went back to being invisible. 30 minutes into the flight, Sarah was half asleep when the first explosion happened. Not an explosion like in movies, no fireball in the cabin, no screaming yet. Just a boom that shook the entire aircraft, followed by violent shaking. Sarah's eyes snapped open. Her brain, trained by 18 years and thousands of flight hours, instantly processed the sound, the vibration pattern, the way the plane lurched left. Engine failure. Number 1. Left side. The oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, yellow plastic cups dangling on rubber tubes, swinging wildly as the plane shook. Now the screaming started. The businessman grabbed his armrest, knuckles white, face pale. The mother clutched her toddler, who was shrieking. All around the cabin, people were panicking, grabbing masks, crying, praying. Sarah's hands gripped her own armrests, but not from fear. From recognition. She'd felt this before. Somalia, 2014. Engine explosion at 12,000 feet. She'd shut down the damaged engine, feathered the prop, and landed the C-130 on one functional engine plus 2 backups. Textbook emergency procedure. The pilots will handle this, she thought. They'll shut down the bad engine, declare emergency, divert to the nearest airport. Scary but survivable. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, professional, controlled, but with an edge of tension underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced an engine failure on the left side. We're declaring an emergency and will be diverting to the nearest suitable airport. The aircraft is designed to fly safely on 3 engines. Please remain calm and keep your seatbelts fastened. Sarah nodded to herself. Good. He was following procedure. 3 engines would get them down safe. Then the second explosion happened. This one was worse. Boom crack roar. The plane didn't just lurch, it rolled hard left, tilting so violently that people screamed and the toddler next to Sarah flew out of her mother's grip, saved only by the seatbelt. Sarah's brain processed it instantly. Second engine. Adjacent to the first. Debris from the first explosion must have hit the second engine. Both left side engines were gone. The massive Boeing 777 now had only 2 functioning engines, both on the right wing. That was very, very bad. Sarah had flown aircraft with engine failures. She'd flown with battle damage. She'd flown with hydraulic failures and electrical failures and every kind of failure you could imagine. But dual engine failure on the same side? That was nearly impossible to control. The plane was trying to spin. With both left engines dead and both right engines at full power, the thrust was completely unbalanced. The aircraft wanted to rotate left, wanted to roll, wanted to enter a spiral that would end with everyone dead in the Rocky Mountains below. Sarah could hear it through the thin cockpit door, raised voices, stress, the sound of pilots fighting controls that barely responded. Then Captain Reynolds' voice again, and this time the professional calm was cracking. Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a second engine failure. Both engines on the left wing are non-responsive. We are. A pause. Sarah could hear someone shouting in the cockpit. Attempting to maintain control. Flight attendants, prepare for emergency landing procedures. The plane dropped. Not a gentle descent. A fall. The right wing dipped dangerously low. Coffee cups and phones and bags flew through the cabin. People screamed. The mother next to Sarah was sobbing, holding her daughter and praying. The businessman had his eyes closed, hands pressed together, lips moving silently. Sarah looked at the emergency exit door 10 rows ahead. She looked at the cockpit door at the front of the cabin. She looked at her dirt-stained hands. "You're a farmer," she told herself. "You left that life behind. You're not qualified for commercial aircraft. You don't know 777 systems. This isn't your problem." But she could hear the pilots through the door. She could hear the desperation. "Pull up. Pull up. I'm trying. The asymmetry is too much. We can't hold it. We need." The plane rolled further. The angle was approaching 45 degrees. At this angle, in seconds they'd enter a spiral. Once the spiral started, recovery would be impossible. 312 people were about to die. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The businessman grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? Sit down." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and when she spoke, her voice had changed. It wasn't the quiet voice of Sarah the farmer. It was the command voice of Colonel Dawson, the voice that had ordered crews through hostile fire and impossible missions. "I'm a pilot," she said. "I can help." "You're a farmer," he shouted, pointing at her overalls. "You work with dirt. This is a 777. Sit down before you kill us all." Sarah pulled her arm free. "I'm both. And right now, they need the pilot." She moved forward through the tilting cabin, using the seatbacks for balance. She'd done this before, moved through unstable aircraft, maintained balance when the floor wasn't level, kept calm when everyone else was panicking. A flight attendant, older woman, name tag said, Patricia, was strapped into a jump seat near the cockpit, face white with fear. Sarah stopped in front of her. "I need to get into that cockpit," Sarah said. Patricia stared at this woman in dirty overalls and work boots. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat." "I'm a pilot," Sarah interrupted. "Former United States Air Force. C-130 Hercules. 18 years of service. 237 humanitarian missions. I've flown aircraft with engine failures, with battle damage, with half the plane shot apart. I've landed on dirt strips in combat zones. I know how to fly with asymmetric thrust." The plane shuddered again, rolling further right. They were running out of time. "I can help them," Sarah said quietly. "But you need to open that door. Now." Patricia's professional training warred with her terror. The plane was dying. The pilots were losing control. This woman in farm clothes said she could help. What did they have to lose? Patricia keyed the cockpit intercom. "Captain Reynolds, there's a passenger who says she's a former Air Force pilot. Says she has experience with engine failures." Silence on the other end. Just the sound of warning alarms and stressed breathing. Then Captain Reynolds' voice, tight with desperation, "Send her in. We'll take anyone." Patricia unlocked the cockpit door. Sarah stepped through. The cockpit was chaos. Captain Reynolds, maybe 50 years old, gray hair, was pulling on the control yoke with both hands, sweat pouring down his face. His arms were shaking from the effort. First Officer Kim, younger, Asian woman, was working the throttles frantically, trying to balance thrust from only 2 engines on one wing. Her voice was high with stress. "Hydraulic pressure is failing. The explosions damaged the left hydraulic system. We're losing control authority. Warning lights covered the instrument panel like Christmas decorations. Red lights. Yellow lights. Alarms beeping and bonging and wailing. The attitude indicator showed the plane banking 35 degrees to the right and increasing. The altitude display showed them at 33,000 feet and descending at 2,000 feet per minute. The airspeed was fluctuating wildly as the pilots tried to maintain control. Sarah's brain, dormant for 5 years, came fully online. She wasn't looking at a commercial 777 cockpit. She was looking at a flying machine in trouble, and flying machines in trouble all spoke the same language. Airspeed. Altitude. Bank angle. Thrust. Control inputs. She'd been speaking this language since she was 22 years old. Captain Reynolds barely glanced at her. Who the hell are you? Sarah Dawson. Former Air Force. C-130 pilot. 18 years. Call sign Harvest. I've flown aircraft with worse damage than this. What's your status? Both left engines destroyed. Reynolds gasped, still fighting the yoke. Catastrophic thrust asymmetry. The aircraft wants to spin. We can't maintain level flight. We're going to lose it. Sarah stepped between the two pilot seats and scanned the instruments. Altitude, 32,800 feet. Bank angle, 38 degrees right and still increasing. Descent rate, 2,200 feet per minute. Two engines on the right wing running at maximum power, actually over maximum, the exhaust temperatures were in the red zone. The pilots were doing everything by the book. And the book was wrong. You're fighting the asymmetry incorrectly, Sarah said, her voice calm and clear. You're trying to use the right engines to push harder. That's making it worse. You need to reduce right side thrust and use rudder trim and aileron to balance. You can't fight physics. You have to work with it. First Officer Kim turned to stare at her. Reduce thrust? Are you insane? We'll lose altitude even faster. You're already losing altitude, Sarah said. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to lose control completely and enter a spin you can't recover from. I've flown asymmetric configurations. You can't muscle your way through this. You have to fly the aircraft crooked but stable. Captain Reynolds was out of options. The bank angle hit 40 degrees. Warning alarms screamed. The ground proximity warning system started blaring. Terrain. Terrain. Pull up. Pull up. Do it. Reynolds shouted at Kim. Listen to her. Sarah leaned over the center console. Reduce right side throttle to 70%. Yes, I know it feels wrong. Trust me. Do it now. Kim pulled the throttles back. The engine spooled down. The aircraft's violent shaking eased slightly. Now, Sarah said, full left rudder trim. Maximum deflection. Use the rudder to counteract the yaw from the asymmetric thrust. Reynolds pushed the rudder pedal hard left, his leg trembling. The plane's nose started to straighten. Good, Sarah said. Now hold right aileron to compensate for the bank. You're not trying to fly level. You're flying in a controlled slip, the aircraft is crooked but stable. Like flying with one wing down, but deliberately. Reynolds pushed the yoke right, fighting every instinct that said to level the wings. The bank angle stopped increasing. 40 degrees. 39. 38. 35. The spiral stopped. The descent rate dropped to 1,800 feet per minute, still descending, but controlled. It's working. Kim breathed, her eyes wide. Oh my God, it's actually working. Maintain this configuration, Sarah said. You're not flying pretty, but you're flying alive. Now declare emergency and get vectors to the nearest airport with the longest runway you can find. Reynolds keyed the radio, his voice still shaking but with a thread of hope now. Mayday, mayday, mayday. United 2947, dual engine failure on the left wing, asymmetric thrust, requesting immediate emergency vectors and... He stopped, turned to look at Sarah. What's your call sign? Who are you really? Sarah hesitated. She hadn't used that name in 5 years. Using it meant exposure. Meant the people who'd buried her would know she was alive. Meant the quiet life she'd built on that Montana farm would end. But 312 lives were depending on her. Harvest, she said quietly. My call sign is Harvest. Reynolds transmitted, passenger call sign Harvest is providing technical assistance. She's a former Air Force cargo pilot with asymmetric flight experience. There was silence on the frequency. Then a new voice, sharp, military, F-15 fighter, United 2947, please repeat. Did you say call sign Harvest? Sarah's heart stopped. Someone recognized the name. Reynolds looked at her, confused, then transmitted, affirmative. Passenger identifies as Colonel Sarah Dawson, call sign Harvest. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a different voice, older, authoritative, another F-15, United 2947, this is Viper lead out of Mountain Home Air Force Base. Colonel Dawson, is it really you? Sarah closed her eyes. 5 years of hiding, gone in one radio transmission. She took the microphone from Reynolds, confirmed, Viper lead. This is Harvest. I've been away. But right now I need you to establish escort and relay technical assistance. We have dual engine failure, flying asymmetric configuration, need vectors to nearest suitable airport with longest available runway. Copy that, Harvest. The excitement in Viper lead's voice was clear. Ma'am, we trained under your humanitarian flight protocols. We studied your Somalia rescue mission in flight school. We thought you were gone, medical discharge 5 years ago. This is, ma'am, it's an honor. Scrambling now. We'll be with you in 8 minutes. First Officer Kim turned to Sarah, eyes wide, they know you. The Air Force knows you. Sarah didn't answer. She was focused on the instruments, calculating. Captain Reynolds, what's your fuel state? 42,000 pounds. Airspeed? 280 knots, fluctuating. Altitude? 29,000 feet, descending at controlled rate. Sarah did the math in her head, calculations she hadn't done in 5 years, but the numbers came instantly, like muscle memory. Salt Lake City International is your best option, she said. Longest runway in range, full emergency services, good weather. You can make it. But you need to start your descent profile now. You're flying wounded, you can't make quick adjustments. Everything needs to be gradual. Reynolds nodded, Denver Center, United 2947 requesting vectors to Salt Lake City International, emergency landing. United 2947, Roger. You are cleared direct Salt Lake. Descend and maintain flight level 200. Emergency services are being notified. All traffic is being cleared from your path. Sarah coached Reynolds through the descent, small throttle adjustments. Gentle banks. The aircraft is balanced right now, any sudden input will destabilize it. Think of it like carrying a full glass of water. Smooth and steady. 8 minutes later, she heard them, the distinctive roar of F-15 fighter jets. 2 fighters slid into formation beside the crippled 777, one on each side, close enough that Sarah could see the pilots' helmets. Viper lead came over the radio, United 2947, we have visual contact. Harvest, we can see the damage. Both left engines are gone, major structural damage to the nacelles. You're maintaining stable flight on 2 engines. That's incredible flying, ma'am. Not me, Viper, Sarah transmitted. Captain Reynolds is doing the flying. I'm just translating impossible into possible. That's what they said you did in Somalia. And Yemen. And the Sudan. Ma'am, some of us in this squadron trained under your supply delivery protocols. You saved thousands of lives with those mercy missions. First Officer Kim was staring at Sarah. Who are you? Sarah kept her eyes on the instruments. Right now. I'm the person helping Captain Reynolds land this plane. Everything else can wait. News spread fast. By the time United 2947 started its final approach to Salt Lake City, every news network in America was covering the story. Dual engine failure over Rockies. Mysterious passenger helping save 312 lives. Air Force pilot emerges from retirement. Sarah didn't know about the news coverage. She was entirely focused on talking Captain Reynolds through an approach that violated every commercial aviation procedure but followed cargo pilot logic. You're landing heavy, she said. Way over maximum landing weight because we didn't have time to burn off fuel. You're asymmetric. You're damaged. Don't try to make it pretty. Just get it on the ground. Gear down, Reynolds said. The landing gear extended with a heavy thunk. The plane shuddered, more drag, more asymmetry to manage. Compensate with right throttle, Sarah said. Small adjustment. There. Good. They were at 5,000 feet. The Salt Lake Valley spread below them, the city, the Great Salt Lake shimmering in the afternoon sun, the airport dead ahead. Viper lead transmitted, Harvest, this is Viper. My little cousin was in that convoy you resupplied in Somalia. The one under hostile fire. He was 15 years old, part of a refugee group. You landed that C-130 on a dirt strip while people were shooting at you. Delivered grain and water that kept 4,000 people alive. He's 25 now. Married. Has a daughter. He named her Sarah, after the pilot who saved his life. Sarah's vision blurred. She blinked hard. He's alive because of you, ma'am, Viper lead continued. Now finish this. Bring these people home. At 1,000 feet, Reynolds said, I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can, Sarah said firmly. You've done everything right so far. This is just one more step. Trust your training. Trust the aircraft. And trust me, I've landed in worse conditions than this. 500 feet. The runway was right there, long, wide, covered with emergency vehicles. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Foam trucks ready to spray if needed. Airspeed 210 knots, First Officer Kim called out. Good, Sarah said. Hold it steady. 200 feet. 100 feet. 50 feet. Flare now, Sarah said. Don't finesse it. Plant it on the runway. Hard landing is better than no landing. Reynolds pulled back on the yoke. The Boeing 777, flying on 2 engines, with 2 destroyed engines hanging from its left wing, with hydraulic damage and overweight and every reason in the world to crash, touched down hard. The main landing gear hit first, slam, tires exploding from the impact, rubber shredding, sparks flying. The nose gear slammed down a second later. Reynolds stood on the brakes. The emergency braking systems activated. The plane shook violently, skidding, decelerating, sparks shooting from the destroyed tires. Sarah gripped the back of Reynolds' seat, watching the runway numbers flash past. 7,000 feet remaining. 6,000. 5,000. The plane was slowing. 4,000 feet. 3,000. 2,000. 1,000. The 777 finally stopped, perfectly centered on the runway, 800 feet from the end. For a moment, nobody in the cockpit moved. Nobody breathed. Then Captain Reynolds started laughing, not humor, just relief, hysteria, disbelief. We're alive. Oh my God, we're alive. First Officer Kim was crying. Sarah just stood there, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, fire trucks spraying foam on the destroyed engines, paramedics ready, police establishing a perimeter. Reynolds turned in his seat to look at Sarah. "You saved us. You saved everyone on this plane. How did you know how to do that?" Sarah looked at her dirt-stained hands. "I flew mercy missions for 18 years, she said quietly. Brought food to people who were starving. Medicine to people who were dying. Sometimes the aircraft was shot up. Sometimes engines failed. Sometimes I had to land on dirt strips with no instruments. You learn to fly anything, anywhere, when lives depend on it." She paused. Today wasn't different. Just different cargo. Same mission, bring people home alive. The cabin door opened. Paramedics entered, checking passengers for injuries. Miraculously, nobody was seriously hurt, some bruises, some whiplash, but everyone was walking. Sarah tried to slip away in the confusion, but Patricia the flight attendant caught her arm. "The news is outside," Patricia said. "Everyone wants to talk to you. They're calling you a hero." "I'm just a farmer," Sarah said. "No," Patricia said firmly. "You're more than that. And the world needs to know." They escorted Sarah off the plane last. Captain Reynolds and First Officer Kim insisted on walking with her. The media was waiting. Cameras. Microphones. Reporters shouting questions. But Sarah barely noticed them. Because standing at the front of the crowd, in full Air Force dress uniform, was General Marcus Hale. Her old wing commander. The man who'd given her a choice 5 years ago: resign quietly or die trying to expose the truth. Sarah stopped dead. General Hale stepped forward. He looked older, more gray hair, more lines in his face. But his eyes were clear and direct. "Colonel Dawson," he said formally. Then he did something Sarah never expected. He saluted her. Sarah stood there in her dirty overalls and work boots, soil still under her fingernails, and automatically returned the salute, muscle memory from 18 years of service. The cameras went crazy. "Colonel Dawson," General Hale said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "On behalf of the United States Air Force, I owe you an apology." Sarah's mouth went dry. 5 years ago, the general continued, you asked questions about missing humanitarian supplies. About food meant for starving children that never reached its destination. About medicine that disappeared between loading and delivery. The reporters had gone silent, recording every word. You were ordered to stop asking those questions, General Hale said. You were told to resign quietly or face consequences. You chose to resign. You disappeared. He paused. But after you left, we couldn't ignore your questions anymore. We investigated. And what we found was the largest corruption scandal in recent Air Force history. 8 officers, including 2 generals, were running a black market operation. Stealing humanitarian supplies. Selling food meant for refugees. Selling medicine meant for dying children. Making millions in profit while people starved. Sarah felt tears running down her face. Because of your questions, we found them, General Hale said. 8 officers court-martialed. Millions of dollars in stolen supplies recovered. Supply chain completely reformed. And you, the pilot who discovered it all, who had the courage to ask the hard questions, you were silenced and forced out. He stepped closer to Sarah. Colonel Dawson, you were right. About the corruption. About putting humanitarian missions first. About everything. And we're sorry. I'm sorry. I should have protected you when you told the truth. Instead, I helped bury it. That's on me. That's on all of us. The general pulled something from his pocket, a metal case. You were nominated for the Distinguished Flying Cross for your Somalia mission, he said. The one where you landed under hostile fire to deliver food to 4,000 refugees. But the paperwork got lost when you resigned. It wasn't lost. It was buried. To keep you quiet. He opened the case. The metal gleamed in the afternoon sun. Colonel Sarah Dawson, call sign Harvest, for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. For courage under fire. For saving lives when others said it was impossible. For asking hard questions when others wanted silence. He pinned the medal to her overalls, right over the dirt stain from this morning's tomato planting. Welcome back, Colonel. The Air Force needs pilots like you. Pilots who understand that mercy is as important as might. That feeding people is as crucial as fighting wars. Will you come back? Lead a new humanitarian aviation program. Train the next generation. Sarah looked at the medal on her overalls. At the cameras. At the crowd. At General Hale. She thought about her farm in Montana. Her tomato plants. Her chickens. The quiet life she'd built. She thought about the 5 years of hiding. Of shame. Of wondering if she'd made the right choice. And then she looked at the 777 behind her, damaged, scarred, but intact. 312 people walking away alive. She spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. General, I appreciate the apology. I appreciate the medal. But I'm a farmer now. I grow food. I live simply. I like that life. She saw disappointment flash across his face. But, she continued, I'll consult. I'll train pilots in asymmetric flight recovery. I'll teach emergency procedures. I'll share what I learned from 18 years of mercy missions. Because you're right, the military needs to remember that sometimes the bravest mission isn't dropping bombs. It's delivering food to people who are starving. It's flying into impossible places because people are dying. She touched the metal on her overalls. I'll keep farming. Because the world needs food as much as it needs heroes. Maybe more. But when you need someone to teach pilots how to land the impossible, how to fly the unflyable, how to bring people home when everyone says it can't be done, call me. Call sign Harvest didn't die when I left the Air Force, Sarah said. It just changed. I still harvest. Just crops instead of lives from war zones. And today, when 312 people needed Harvest the pilot, I was ready. Because a farmer understands something important, you reap what you sow. She smiled, first real smile in years. I sowed years of flight training. Today I reaped 312 lives saved. That's a good harvest. And there are more seeds to plant, in fields and in flight schools. So I'll do both. Farmer and teacher. Harvest in the dirt and harvest in the sky. The crowd erupted in applause. A reporter pushed forward, Colonel Dawson. What will you do now? Go home, Sarah said. Finish planting my tomatoes. Feed my chickens. Then maybe write some training manuals for the Air Force about asymmetric flight recovery. But first, tomatoes. Because food doesn't grow itself, and people need to eat. Another reporter, do you regret leaving the Air Force? Sarah thought about it. I regret that telling the truth about stolen food meant losing my career, she said. I regret that children starved while officers got rich. I regret being silenced instead of heard. But I don't regret becoming a farmer. Farming taught me something the military forgot, the most important mission is feeding people. Whether you do it from a cargo plane or from 40 acres in Montana, same mission. Feed the hungry. Sustain life. She looked directly at the camera. Today, 312 people lived because I remembered how to fly. But for 5 years, I've fed hundreds with vegetables from my farm. Both matter. Both are service. And I'm done choosing between them. I'll be both. Farmer. Teacher. Pilot when needed. And I'm okay with that. Sarah stood in her Montana field at dawn, planting tomatoes. The soil was perfect, moist, dark, rich with nutrients. She'd spent the winter months composting, preparing, making the earth ready for spring planting. Her hands worked automatically, making holes, placing seedlings, covering roots, moving to the next spot. Repetitive. Peaceful. Good work. Behind her, the farmhouse was quiet. The chickens were still in their coop, not yet released for the day. The sun was just starting to peek over the eastern mountains, painting the sky pink and gold. This was Sarah's favorite time. Before the world woke up. Before phones rang and emails pinged and people wanted things. Just her and the dirt and the plants. 6 months since the emergency landing. 6 months since her face had been on every news channel. 6 months since Farmer Saves 312 Lives had become the feel-good story of the year. The media attention had been intense at first. Reporters camped outside her farm. Interview requests flooded in. Book deals. Movie offers. Everyone wanted a piece of the hero farmer pilot. Sarah had said no to almost everything. She'd done one interview, 60 Minutes, because they'd promised to focus on humanitarian missions and the importance of feeding people, not just on the dramatic rescue. She'd written training manuals for the Air Force, detailed technical documents on asymmetric flight recovery, emergency procedures for dual-engine failure, mental preparation for impossible situations. She'd gone to Mountain Home Air Force Base twice to lecture new pilots. She'd stood in front of rooms full of 23-year-old pilots who looked at her like she was a legend, and she'd told them, flying isn't about being a hero. It's about getting the job done. Sometimes that job is delivering supplies. Sometimes it's saving passengers. But it's always about bringing people home safe. And then she'd come back here. To her tomatoes. To her chickens. To the quiet. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Sarah sighed. The world couldn't leave her alone for even one morning. She pulled out the phone, dirt smudging the screen. Military frequency number. She almost declined the call. She was tired of consultations, tired of questions, tired of being Colonel Dawson when she just wanted to be Sarah the farmer. But something made her answer. Dawson. Harvest, this is Viper Lead. The voice was familiar, one of the F-15 pilots who'd escorted her damaged 777 6 months ago. Morning, Viper, Sarah said, kneeling to plant another tomato seedling. What can I do for you? We have a situation, ma'am. Humanitarian crisis in East Africa. Severe famine in South Sudan. The UN is requesting U.S. military assistance. We need someone to coordinate a supply delivery mission, 50 tons of food and medical supplies into a hot zone. Airstrip is barely functional. Local militia activity in the area. Weather is terrible. And ma'am, the new cargo pilots are good, but they're scared. They've never flown a mission like this. Sarah's hands paused in the dirt. You want me to plan the mission? No, ma'am. We want you to fly it. Sarah stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. Viper, I've been out of the cockpit for 5 years, except for that one emergency. I'm not current on procedures. I haven't done a check ride. I can't just. We need someone who's done it before, Viper interrupted. Someone who knows how to land a C-130 on a dirt strip with hostile fire. Someone who understands that the mission isn't complete until the supplies are in the hands of people who need them. Someone who won't turn back when it gets hard. He paused. Ma'am, there are 8,000 people in that region who will die without this food delivery. And the pilots we have, they're good, but they're not you. They don't have your experience. They haven't flown 237 Mercy missions. They haven't earned the name Harvest. Sarah looked at her tomato plants. Tiny seedlings, just starting their journey from seed to fruit. In 3 months, these plants would produce tomatoes. Those tomatoes would feed maybe 100 people at farmers' markets. In South Sudan, 8,000 people needed food today. How much time do I have to decide? Sarah asked. Mission launches in 18 hours. We need you at Mountain Home Air Force Base in 12 hours for briefing. C-130J is being prepped now. Sarah closed her eyes. She'd spent 5 years trying to leave this behind. 5 years building a life where she didn't have to make impossible choices. 5 years where she could just plant seeds and watch them grow and know exactly where her work ended up. But the truth was, she'd always known this moment would come. Because harvesting isn't just about growing food. It's about delivering it to people who need it. And sometimes the field is in Montana. Sometimes it's South Sudan. I'll be there in 10 hours, Sarah said. Tell the crew to prep for approach under hostile conditions. I want current intel on the airstrip, weather patterns, and militia activity zones. And Viper, I'm coming straight from the farm. I'll be wearing overalls. Tell them not to judge. She could hear the smile in Viper's voice. Copy that, Harvest. The C-130 doesn't care what you're wearing. Neither do the 8,000 people who need that food. See you in 10 hours, ma'am. And Harvest, welcome back. Sarah hung up. She looked at her field. At the rows of seedlings she'd just planted. At the farmhouse. At the life she'd built. You can come back, she told herself. This is just one mission. Just like the old days. And then you come home. She walked to the farmhouse, already making mental checklists. Call neighbor to feed the chickens. Check weather patterns for South Sudan. Review C-130J systems, probably changed since her last flight. Review approach procedures for hostile environments. Pack, but what does a farmer pilot pack for a mercy mission? She laughed at that last one. Same thing she always packed, practical clothes, good boots, and the knowledge that she was about to do something impossible. 12 hours later, Sarah stood in the briefing room at Mountain Home Air Force Base. She was wearing clean overalls, different from the dirt-stained ones from the tomato field, but still farm clothes. Work boots. Her hair in a practical bun. No uniform. No medals. Just Sarah. The room was full of pilots, young men and women in flight suits, staring at her like she was a ghost. Captain Marcus Chen, mission commander, stepped forward. He looked nervous. Colonel Dawson, I'm honored to meet you. Your Somalia mission is legendary. We've all studied it. But ma'am, I have to ask, are you sure you're current? The C-130J has different systems than the old Hercules. The avionics have been completely updated. The approach procedures. Are the wings still attached? Sarah interrupted. Yes, ma'am. Does it have engines? For turboprops, yes ma'am. Does it fly? Yes ma'am. Then I can fly it, Sarah said simply. The fancy electronics are nice, but flying is flying. Airspeed, altitude, thrust, control inputs. Physics hasn't changed. Now show me the mission brief. They projected a map of South Sudan on the screen. Red zones marked militia activity. Yellow zones marked uncertain areas. One tiny green dot marked the airstrip, barely visible, surrounded by red and yellow. The strip is 2,200 meters, Captain Chen said. Dirt and gravel. No lights, no instruments, no tower. Weather forecast shows thunderstorms in the region. Visibility will be poor. And intelligence reports militia activity within 5 kilometers of the strip. Who's on the ground? Sarah asked. UN workers and local volunteers. They're expecting us. They'll mark the runway with fires if we can't see it. But ma'am, if we take fire during approach, we'll have to abort. The risk. The risk is 8,000 people starve, Sarah said flatly. What's our cargo manifest? 40 tons of rice and grain. 8 tons of medical supplies. 2 tons of water purification equipment. Sarah nodded. Good. That's enough to sustain the population for 2 weeks while more supplies come. When do we launch? 0400 hours. 5 hours from now. Then let's use those 5 hours wisely, Sarah said. I need a check ride on the C-130J systems. I need current weather updates every 30 minutes. I need to review approach procedures with the co-pilot. And I need coffee, military strong, black, none of that flavored nonsense. Someone laughed nervously. Captain Chen saluted. Yes, ma'am. Colonel Dawson, it's an honor to fly with you. Sarah returned the salute. The honor will be delivering those supplies, Captain. Everything else is just flying. Now let's get to work. The C-130J Hercules was beautiful. Sarah stood on the tarmac at 0330 hours, looking up at the massive cargo plane. It was bigger than she remembered, or maybe she'd just gotten used to looking at tomato plants instead of aircraft. The 4 turboprops gleamed under the floodlights. The cargo ramp was open, revealing the interior packed with pallets of rice, grain, medical supplies. 50 tons of life. Captain Chen approached. Colonel, we're loaded and ready. Weather update shows the storm system is moving faster than expected. We'll be landing in heavy rain. Visibility will be less than half a mile. Then we'll use fires for runway markers, Sarah said. I've done it before. She climbed into the cockpit. The moment she sat in the pilot's seat, something inside her relaxed. This was home. Not the farmhouse in Montana. Not the quiet fields. This. The cockpit. The instruments. The responsibility of bringing supplies to people who needed them. She ran through the pre-flight checklist, 5 years rusty, but the movements came back instantly. Switches. Dials. System checks. All systems green, First Officer Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez reported. She was young, maybe 26, and trying not to look nervous about flying with a legend. Good, Sarah said. Let's bring these people their food. She started the engines. The turboprops roared to life, that familiar, powerful sound. The aircraft shook slightly as each engine spooled up. Mountain Home Tower, this is Mercy 1 requesting taxi clearance. Mercy 1, cleared to taxi runway 28. Godspeed, Harvest. Bring them home safe. Sarah taxied the massive cargo plane to the runway. 50 tons of supplies. 4 crew members. 1 mission. 8,000 lives depending on them. She pushed the throttles forward. The C-130J accelerated down the runway, heavy, loaded, powerful. The nose lifted. The main gear left the ground. And Sarah was flying again. 6 hours later, they were over South Sudan. The storm was worse than forecasted. Black clouds towered to 40,000 feet. Lightning cracked across the sky. Rain hammered the windscreen. Turbulence shook the aircraft violently. Radar shows the airstrip is 12 miles ahead, Lieutenant Rodriguez said, gripping her seat as the plane bounced. But I can't see anything through this rain. You won't see it until we're almost on top of it, Sarah said calmly. She'd flown through worse, Somalia, 2014, with sandstorms and tracer fire. This was just weather. Tell the ground team to light the fires. We're coming in. Captain Chen, sitting behind them as mission observer, spoke into the radio, ground team, this is Mercy 1. Request runway markers. Visibility is 0. We need those fires now. A crackling voice responded, heavy accent, stressed, Mercy 1, we have fires ready. But there is problem. Militia spotted 2 kilometers south. They have vehicles. Maybe technical trucks with guns. We think they will try to stop the delivery. Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course. Nothing was ever simple. How long until they reach you? Sarah asked. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. 10 minutes. Sarah checked her altitude. 8,000 feet. The airstrip was at 4,000 feet elevation. Normal approach would be gradual descent, careful setup, visual confirmation of the runway before committing. But normal approach would take 20 minutes. These people had 10. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Sarah said, I'm going to make a combat approach. Steep descent, tight spiral, land fast. It's going to be rough. Are you ready? Rodriguez swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Captain Chen, strap in tight. Tell the loadmaster to secure those cargo pallets, they're about to move around. And tell the ground team to light those fires. We're coming in fast. Sarah pushed the nose down. The C-130 dropped like a stone, 4,000 feet per minute descent rate, spiraling down through the storm, rain streaming over the windscreen, turbulence shaking everything. Warning alarms beeped. Sink rate. Sink rate. I know, Sarah muttered, fighting the controls. Quiet. She ignored the alarms. Ignored the instruments screaming at her that this descent was too fast, too steep, too dangerous. She was flying by instinct now. By feel. By 18 years of doing impossible things. 6,000 feet. 5,000. I see the fires. Rodriguez shouted. 2 o'clock, low. Sarah banked right. There, tiny orange dots in the darkness, barely visible through the rain. The runway markers. 4,500 feet. She pulled out of the spiral, lined up with the fires. The airstrip was a dark slash through the darkness, dirt and gravel, barely visible, rain turning it to mud. We're too fast. Rodriguez said. Airspeed is 40 knots above landing speed. I know, Sarah said. We'll brake hard. Better to blow tires than get shot on approach. 3,000 feet. 2,000. The fires were rushing up to meet them, the ground team had made a perfect line, showing the runway centerline. 1,000 feet. Gear down. Sarah commanded. The landing gear extended with a heavy thunk. 500 feet. Full flaps. The flaps deployed. The aircraft shuddered, drag increasing, nose pitching up. 200 feet. Sarah could see people on the ground now, running, pointing, waving. The UN workers and volunteers, risking their lives to receive this delivery. 100 feet. Brace. Sarah shouted. The C-130 hit the dirt runway hard, slam, main gear first, then nose gear, bouncing, skidding through the mud. Sarah stood on the brakes. Reverse thrust on all 4 engines. The aircraft shook violently, spraying mud, hydroplaning on the wet surface. They were going too fast. The runway was too short. They were going to overshoot. Sarah fought the controls, maximum braking, feeling the tires starting to shred from the stress. The end of the runway was rushing toward them. The C-130 stopped. 20 meters from the end of the runway. Sitting in ankle-deep mud. Engine screaming. But stopped. We're down, Sarah said quietly. Drop the ramp. Let's unload this cargo before those militia trucks arrive. The cargo ramp dropped. Rain poured in. Sarah could see the ground team running toward them, maybe 20 people, thin and exhausted but moving with purpose. Sarah unbuckled and moved to the cargo hold. The loadmaster, Sergeant Davis, young guy with scared eyes, was already releasing the pallets. We've got 8 minutes. Sarah shouted over the rain and engine noise. Maybe less. Move fast. The ground team swarmed up the ramp. They had a forklift, old, rusty, but functional. They started pulling pallets out. 40 tons of rice. 8 tons of medical supplies. 2 tons of water equipment. It should take an hour to unload. They had 8 minutes. Faster, the ground team leader shouted, a woman, maybe 40, wearing a UN vest and covered in mud. They are coming. We can hear the trucks. Sarah grabbed a pallet and helped push. She was still wearing her overalls, now soaked with rain and mud. Her work boots slipped in the wet cargo hold. But she pushed. Everyone pushed. Rice bags. Medical crates. Water filters. Everything moving, flowing, people working with desperate speed. 5 minutes. 4 minutes. Then Sarah heard it, engines in the distance. Trucks. Coming fast. That's them, the ground team leader shouted. We must go. The cargo isn't all unloaded. Captain Chen protested. Leave it. Go. If they catch you here, they will kill you and take everything. Sarah looked at the remaining pallets. Maybe 5 tons still in the aircraft. But 45 tons were out. On the ground. In the hands of people who would distribute it. We go, Sarah decided. Ramp up. Now. The loadmaster hit the button. The ramp started to close. The ground team scattered, running toward vehicles hidden in the trees. Sarah ran back to the cockpit, muddy boots slipping on the deck. She threw herself into the pilot's seat. Engine start. All 4. Don't wait for warm-up. The turboprop screamed to life, cold start, rough, but running. Sarah could see lights now, vehicle headlights, bouncing through the darkness. Coming toward them. Maybe 2 kilometers away. Maybe less. Takeoff clearance. Rodriguez asked automatically. There's no tower. Sarah snapped. We're cleared by not wanting to die. Hold on. She pushed the throttles to maximum. The C-130, lighter now, minus 45 tons, lurched forward through the mud. Slow. Too slow. The mud was thick. The wheels were bogged down. They were wallowing, not accelerating. Come on, Sarah whispered. Come on. Move. The trucks were visible now. Technical trucks, pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in the back. Sarah could see muzzle flashes. They were shooting. We're taking fire. Rodriguez screamed. Bullets pinged off the fuselage. A window cracked. But the C-130 was moving. Slowly. Painfully. But moving. Airspeed, 40 knots. 50 knots. The trucks were paralleling them now, keeping pace, machine guns firing. 60 knots. 70. Rotate speed is 90 knots. Rodriguez said. The trucks were pulling ahead, trying to get in front of them, trying to block the runway. 80 knots. One truck made it, pulled directly across the runway, 200 meters ahead. There's a truck on the runway. Chen shouted. I see it, Sarah said grimly. 85 knots. 90 knots. Sarah pulled back on the yoke. The C-130's nose lifted. Main gear still on the ground, rolling through the mud, heading directly toward the truck blocking their path. We're not going to clear it. Rodriguez screamed. Yes we are, Sarah said. Hold on. 100 knots. The main gear left the ground. The C-130 lifted, heavy, sluggish, climbing at a shallow angle. The truck was right there. Men diving out of the way. The C-130's landing gear, still extended, passed over the truck with maybe 3 feet of clearance. Then they were airborne. Climbing into the storm. Lightning flashing around them. Rain hammering. But airborne. Safe. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Gear up, she said quietly. Let's go home. 2 days later, Sarah was back in her Montana field. She was planting tomatoes again, finishing the rows she'd started before the phone call. The seedlings had waited patiently in their greenhouse. Now it was time to get them in the ground. Her hands worked the soil, making holes, placing plants, covering roots. The same hands that had flown a C-130 through a storm and hostile fire 48 hours ago. Dirt under the nails again. As it should be. Her phone buzzed. Sarah almost ignored it, but she checked the screen. Text from Captain Chen. Colonel Dawson, just received word from ground team. All 45 tons of supplies successfully distributed. 8,000 people receiving food. 0 casualties. Mission success. And ma'am, the woman who led the ground team asked me to tell you, her name is Amara. She was one of the refugees in Somalia in 2014. She was 12 years old. You delivered grain that saved her life. Now she's delivering food to others. She said to tell you, harvest is contagious. Thank you. Sarah sat back in the dirt, tears streaming down her face. That little girl from Somalia. 12 years old, starving. Now a woman, leading a UN ground team, saving others. The harvest continuing. 3 months later, the tomatoes were ready. Sarah stood at the farmer's market in Billings, Montana, with crates of fresh tomatoes from her fields. Beautiful tomatoes, red, ripe, organic, grown with care. People came to her stand. They bought tomatoes. Some recognized her from the news. You're that pilot, one woman said. The one who saved that plane. I'm a farmer, Sarah said, handing her a bag of tomatoes. The pilot thing was just a side job. An older man bought 6 tomatoes. I'm a veteran, he said quietly. Air Force, 1970s. I heard what you did. Choosing court-martial over flying weapons instead of food. That took guts. Sarah smiled. Choosing food over weapons isn't brave. It's obvious. People can't eat bullets. Still, the man said. Thank you for remembering what service really means. At the end of the day, Sarah had sold every tomato. The crates were empty. She loaded her truck and drove home. That night, sitting on her porch with a cup of coffee, Sarah's phone rang. Military frequency again. She answered, Dawson. Harvest, this is General Hale. Sarah sat up straighter. Evening, General. Colonel, I need to ask you something. We have 3 new humanitarian missions scheduled. Guatemala, Bangladesh, and Mali. All famine situations. All requiring experienced pilots who know how to fly into difficult conditions. Our new pilots are trained, but they're asking for you. They want to learn from the best. Would you consider making this official? Part-time consultant. Fly the tough missions. Train the new generation. And then go home to your farm. We're not asking you to choose between farming and flying anymore. We're asking you to do both. Sarah looked at her tomato plants, barely visible in the darkness. How many missions per year, she asked. Maybe 6. Maybe 10. Whenever lives depend on experience rather than just training. Sarah thought about it. Amara. The little girl from Somalia, now a woman saving others. The 8,000 people in South Sudan, fed because she'd flown through a storm. The 312 passengers on that crippled 777, alive because she'd remembered how to fly. And the hundreds of people who'd bought her tomatoes, fed by vegetables she'd grown with her own hands. Different kinds of harvest. Same mission. I'll do it, Sarah said. But General, I'm not wearing a uniform. I fly in overalls and work boots. I come straight from the farm. Take it or leave it. She could hear the smile in General Hale's voice. Colonel Dawson, you could fly in a clown suit for all I care. You're the best Mercy pilot we've ever had. Overalls are perfect. Welcome back to service. Part-time. On your terms. Good, Sarah said. Send me the mission briefs. I'll review them between planting and harvest. And General, call sign harvest stays. Because that's what this is about. Harvesting lives. Whether from the air or from the soil. Copy that, harvest. Always. 1 year later, Sarah stood in front of a room full of new Air Force pilots. She was wearing her overalls. Clean ones, but still farm clothes. Still work boots. Still dirt under her nails from the morning's work in the fields. The pilots, young, eager, wearing perfect flight suits, stared at her with a mixture of respect and confusion. A woman in overalls teaching them to fly. This was Harvest. The legend? Sarah smiled. I'm Colonel Sarah Dawson, she said. Call sign Harvest. I've flown 253 humanitarian missions, the original 237, plus 16 in the past year. I've delivered food to people who were starving. Medicine to people who were dying. I've landed on dirt strips under hostile fire. I've flown damaged aircraft when everyone said it was impossible. I've saved lives from the cockpit. She paused. I'm also a farmer. I grow tomatoes, lettuce, carrots, beans. I raise chickens. I sell vegetables at farmers' markets. I've fed thousands of people with food I grew with my own hands. I've saved lives from the soil. She walked to the front of the room. Some of you are wondering, why farming? Why not focus on flying? You're pilots. Why waste time with vegetables? She let the question hang. Because flying is how you deliver food. Farming is how you grow it. Both are essential. Both save lives. And understanding one makes you better at the other. Sarah pulled up a photo on the screen, her C-130 landing in South Sudan, mud spraying, hostile fire in the background. When I flew this mission, I was coming directly from my farm. I'd been planting tomatoes that morning. My hands had soil under the nails. And you know what? That made me a better pilot. Because I understood exactly what was in those cargo pallets. Not just food, 40 tons of rice that I knew, from farming, would feed 8,000 people for 2 weeks. I knew how much rice you need per person. I knew what that food meant. Because I grow food. She clicked to another photo, her tomato field in Montana, rows of healthy plants. And when I farm, I'm a better farmer because I'm a pilot. I understand logistics. I understand timing. I understand that you can't rush nature, just like you can't rush a safe landing. You have to work with conditions as they are, not as you wish they were. She looked at the young pilots. Some of you will fly combat missions. Some will fly transport. Some will fly humanitarian missions. All of that is important. But I'm here to teach you this, the most important mission isn't the most dangerous one. It's the one that saves lives. Whether you're delivering food to refugees or flying wounded soldiers to hospitals or, someday, teaching the next generation of pilots, your job is to bring people home. To sustain life. To harvest lives from death. She smiled. That's what harvest means. Not the person. The mission. The purpose. You harvest lives. You gather people from danger and bring them to safety. You deliver what people need to survive. And sometimes, often, the supplies you're delivering are food. So you'd better understand food. Where it comes from. How it's grown. What it means to people who don't have it. She pulled out a tomato from her pocket, ripe, red, fresh from her farm that morning. This tomato took 90 days to grow. From seed to fruit. 3 months of sun and water and soil and care. It'll feed one person for one meal. Maybe two if they're small portions. That's what food means. Time. Work. Care. And when you're flying 40 tons of rice into a war zone, you're carrying 400,000 of these moments. 400,000 meals. Each one representing work and time and care. She set the tomato on the desk. So yes, I'm a farmer. And yes, I'm a pilot. Because both are the same mission. Feed people. Sustain life. Harvest hope from despair. She looked at each young pilot. Some of you will forget this. You'll focus on flight hours and promotions and fancy aircraft. That's fine. Do your job well. But some of you, maybe one or two, you'll remember. You'll understand that flying isn't about machines. It's about people. It's about bringing home what people need to survive. And maybe, someday, when you retire from flying, you'll buy some land. Plant some seeds. Grow some food. And you'll discover that the harvest never stops. It just changes form. The room was silent. Then one pilot, young woman, maybe 24, raised her hand. Colonel Dawson, ma'am, can we visit your farm? Learn about growing food? So we understand what we're delivering. Sarah smiled. Absolutely. Next weekend. Bring work clothes and be ready to get dirty. I'll teach you to plant tomatoes. Then we'll talk about flying. Because you can't harvest lives if you don't understand harvest. 5 years after the emergency landing, Sarah Dawson stood in her field at dawn. She was 52 years old now. More gray in her hair. More lines around her eyes. Hands rougher from a decade of farming. She'd flown 43 humanitarian missions in those 5 years. Guatemala. Bangladesh. Mali. Somalia again. Yemen. Syria. Wherever people needed food and the delivery was impossible and they needed someone who could make impossible routine. She'd trained 63 pilots in asymmetric flight recovery. 12 of them had used those skills to save aircraft and passengers in emergencies. She'd grown and sold vegetables that fed thousands through farmers' markets. She'd written 3 training manuals that were now standard Air Force curriculum. She'd turned down every interview request, every book deal, every movie offer. Because she wasn't a hero. She was just someone who understood harvest. Her phone buzzed. Text from Amara in South Sudan. Harvest, we have new refugees arriving. 10,000 people. Can you help? Sarah looked at her tomato plants. They were doing fine. Her neighbor could water them. She texted back. Yes. When do you need me? Tomorrow. If possible. Sarah smiled. Tomorrow was always possible when people were hungry. She texted her neighbor, packed her bag, and drove to Mountain Home Air Force Base. 20 hours later, she was in the cockpit of a C-130, flying through African skies, cargo hold packed with 60 tons of food. 20 hours after that, she was back in Montana, planting tomatoes. Because that's what harvest means. You plant. You fly. You deliver. You return. You plant again. The cycle never stops. Lives saved from the sky. Lives sustained from the soil. Both matter. Both are service. Both are harvest. Years later, they asked Sarah Dawson what she wanted on her tombstone. She thought about it. Call sign, harvest, she said. Farmer. Pilot. Feeder of the hungry. Then she smiled. Actually, forget the tombstone. When I die, plant a fruit tree. Let it grow food. Let people eat from it. That's better than any monument. A tree that feeds people forever, that's the real harvest. And that's exactly what they did. This is the story of Sarah Harvest Dawson. Who chose food over weapons? Who chose truth over safety? Who chose to be both farmer and pilot, understanding that service takes many forms? Who proved that the person everyone dismisses, the woman in overalls with dirt under her nails, might be exactly the hero the world needs? Who taught us that harvesting lives and harvesting crops are the same mission, feeding a hungry world, one delivery at a time? Some people grow food. Some people fly missions. And sometimes, rarely, someone does both. Someone who understands that you reap what you sow. Someone who sows seeds in the soil and in the sky. Someone named Harvest.